okay to be sleepy. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to go to sleep. And I won't take it personally if you do kind of doze off a little bit or get an elbow or something like that. I kind of get that. Does everyone have a notebook? You still, or you throw those away? You still got them? Okay. There's some things in there that we may or may not go through. I might just give you these concepts and let you play with those yourself. The handouts deal with just some ideas, and there's a website in there too that I find very helpful. I'd like to recommend to you. But you can check all that out later. They're really self-explanatory. They kind of go through some things. But I think I want to give you some information, and they kind of talk about it a little bit, and then we'll just kind of chill after that. Does that work? You guys look like a chilling group. Yeah. Cool. I want to talk about the family constellation, putting power back in parenting. And I want to give you some history about parenting and talk about the family of origin. The concept that I go through as a counselor myself, I use a systemic approach to pretty much everything that I do, but particularly when we talk about marriage and family. And I use a systemic approach because I truly believe that our families of origin affect everything that we do now. We are a makeup of where we came from. And that's our family, our parents, our siblings, even our sibling position, our birth order is important as to who we are. And the circumstances that we face, there are some things that statistically show this, and from a psychological perspective, they kind of prove who we are or makes us who we can be. Now, that is all still a choice. That doesn't mean that you're etched this way, and if this is how you were raised, this is how you have to be. That's not true. But there is a connection to the family of origin that we need to kind of examine. So as we talk about the family constellation and putting the power back in parenting, there are some realizations we need to come to when we understand that we have to raise little people, because that's what we're doing. And there are some processes that from the way we came from were quite different than what we do today. One example for sure is when I was growing up, it was nothing for my mom or dad to whip out a belt like a lightsaber and just start wailing on us. That's just how they did things. Probably when my kids were maybe 3, I'm trying to think of a time, but I think after that time, other than kind of giving them a little hit to get their attention for something at 2 and 3. After they started talking and reasoning, we just kind of quit with them. We stopped. And then, people threw scriptures out like, what scripture am I thinking of?
Spare the rod.
You heard that. Spare the rod and spoil the child. So whoop the kid. Some people would tell stories about, especially from the South, and parents getting a switch, or maybe you go to the old oak tree and get your own switch, and if you get a little thin one, they're going to go get the branch and plug you with it, or unplugging an extension cord, or I don't know, getting an iron. Whatever they decided to do as a form of discipline. And I still have very interesting discussions with my parents now when they talk about kids need to be spanked. And, that's what's wrong with those kids. They need a good whooping. They wouldn't know what to do with a good whooping and all that kind of stuff. So there's a philosophy of what that whipping or spanking was supposed to teach. And did it actually accomplish that goal or teach that? What did it actually accomplish? How many of you were spanked when you were younger? Oh, geez, smokes. How many of you still spank your children now? Almost all. How many of you use like a weapon to do it? Yeah, I'm calling a belt a weapon. How many of you killers, How many of you? How many of you use some type of weapon to discipline your children? By show of hands. What was it? A spoon. Good old spoon, eh? Are you throwing this spoon, or are you, just whacking them across the head, or, no? I'm just envisioning a spoon, and I'm thinking something, I don't know. Eye gouging, I'm ready to know. All right. How many of you feel that the spankings that your children get are really effective? It's working. But what you're doing is working with the whole belt thing, or whatever you're using. I got about half of you. The other half, what are you just debating it now? Or are you? Pardon?
It's not working.
Yes. Depends on the child. Some children should be beaten and others just talk to them. How do you determine that? If they cry real loud or if they keep doing it? I get it. Okay. All right. Well, that is interesting of how we're parenting. Yes, sir.
Well, some of the answer really needs to be tempered by perspective, too. When I was outside earlier, a lot of these kids are so young that, I mean, when our children were younger, I couldn't have told you whether any of our discipline was doing the job. I mean, we were trying to do what we had learned.
Exactly.
But, I mean, as an older parent now, I have a different perspective, and I truly believe as my children got older and I pulled back, there are other forms of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there was a time in our lives when it was necessary, and then it ended. So maybe to their credit, they haven't had that chance yet.
Because of you're saying because of the youngness.
There's a lot of young kids.
Yeah, there's a lot of young ones, and about the age that these run around here, I think we did too. And I guess in my whole point, and your point is well taken. Our perspective, our family of origin that we came out of, if it was done there, that made it okay for us to do. If it wasn't done there, it really, you'd be like almost afraid of it. But the question is still, is that effective, and what's the measuring stick of the perfection? If it is just if they did it again, or not, then the spanking worked. That can't be it. Or maybe they got good and fooled you, and they're still doing it, and you think they're not. But either way, it teaches them something, and we have to examine what actually is teaching them. And is it getting across what we wanted to teach them? Because even when you think of the physical parts of it, because kids will learn from what you do. They rarely learn from what you say. They're going to watch you do something, they're going to follow you doing it, they're going to learn that. So when you talk about, like for me, it was in my son, I clearly am far more physical with him than I am my daughters. That's probably biased, good, bad, or ugly. I just don't want my daughter knowing what a guy hitting you feels like. They won't. And I'll go to jail first. They will not ever know what that feels like. But I didn't come from an abusive relationship. My dad, Mayberry men just didn't do that kind of stuff. My sister probably needed a couple good ones from my dad. She never got one. Me and my brother, all the time. It's ridiculous. But my mom would. But my daughters, and it seems as you know your kids, I know that with one of my daughters, I can say I'm disappointing you and everything is ruined. You can tell in her face she'll start crying. I never even hit her, so I'm disappointed in this. But the other one looks at me and like, oh, Dad, you'll be all right. It's kind of just, we'll be fine. This will blow over. And that's just how she responds, And with my son, it's kind of maybe like a little guilt thing. If he knows I'm disappointed, he just kind of goes, all right, because they all say I talk a lot, so you can imagine. And so they got to hear me talk, and sometimes that's worse than whatever else would be there. Jeremy, second.
We're real big about consistency, and I know that's a good thing. Spanking is, we try really hard not to spank our angel, especially. And we make a really good effort for them, but spanking is not typically our automatic first. That's kind of like the last resort to the situation. If I'm mad and they're in the church building and acting up or something, I might snatch them up and put them in the bathroom. They don't get spanked every time we go to the bathroom. But, I don't want to make it out like I just spanked that anger and I was spanking that anger. It's the fact that consistent punishment, or correction, put it that way, not punishment, correction.
That's a better word.
Is important to us. Now, it's not necessarily the form, like you said, spanking, but yeah, we do spank them, but I guess it's only given a given situation.
That's interesting. I think you kind of justified a little bit. All right, go ahead.
I think more than fear, they need to know consequences. Even at that young age, more than anything than fear.
So they would learn the consequences of, hey, you did something wrong, so when you do things wrong in life, there's punishments to those things wrong.
Correct.
I think everybody would say that's probably why we do it. Is the punishment that they get beat?
It's a
Life's like that now?
Work for Jeremy.
Some of them work with him, though.
Did it? Well, yeah, well, I guess. Well, it is interesting. I'm actually not going to talk too much about the spanking thing. I just thought I'd throw it out and see how